Hey there, viewer. Before we dive into this super exciting story, I want you to do something fun. Drop a comment down below and tell me, where are you watching from today? Are you at home, at school, or maybe somewhere totally cool? Oh, and if you love wild stories about crazy stuff happening in neighborhoods, make sure to hit that subscribe button. That way you won't miss any of the awesome tales I've got coming up. Now, here's a question to get you thinking. Have you ever had a neighbor who acted like they were the boss of everyone? Maybe they told you to be quiet or complained about something silly. If you have, you're gonna love this story. Stick around because this one's a big, juicy adventure. It was a bright, sunny afternoon in a place called Oakwood Heights. The sky was blue, the birds were singing, and the air felt warm and happy. It was the kind of day that made you want to run outside and do something fun. That's exactly what a kid named Tim Carter was doing. Tim was 14 years old, and he lived in a cozy house with a big backyard. He wasn't like every other kid on the block. Nope, Tim was special. He loved building things, fixing things, and playing with gadgets. His favorite toy, a shiny, buzzing drone that could fly high above the trees. Tim's drone wasn't just any toy. It had a little camera on it, and he could control it with a remote. He'd make it zoom up, spin around, and even do flips in the air. To Tim, flying his drone was like being a pilot, exploring the world from way up high. That afternoon, he was out in his backyard, grinning from ear to ear as his drone hummed like a happy bee. He made it soar over his swing set, dip low by the flower garden, and then climb up toward the clouds. This is so cool, Tim said to himself, his eyes sparkling with excitement. Oakwood Heights was a quiet neighborhood, full of neat houses with green lawns and colorful mailboxes. Kids rode bikes down the street, and sometimes you'd hear a dog bark or a lawnmower hum. It seemed like the perfect place to live. But not everyone in Oakwood Heights was friendly. Oh no, there was one person who made things, well, let's just say interesting. Her name was Karen Walsh, and she was the kind of neighbor who noticed everything. If someone parked their car a little crooked, Karen would know. As if a kid left a soccer ball in the yard, Karen would write a note about it. And if anything made even a tiny bit of noise, you bet Karen would be there, ready to complain. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the president of something called the HOA. That stands for Homeowners Association, which is like a group that makes rules for the neighborhood. Karen loved being in charge. She walked around with a clipboard, checking to see if everyone was following her rules. Grass can't be too long, she'd say. No loud music, she'd warn. To Karen, Oakwood Heights was her kingdom, and she was the queen. Most people just rolled their eyes and ignored her, but Tim. He was about to learn that Karen didn't like his drone one bit. See, Tim was new to the neighborhood. He and his mom had moved to Oakwood Heights just a few months ago. Tim's mom worked long hours, so Tim spent a lot of time exploring and playing with his gadgets. He was a quiet kid, not the kind to cause trouble. But to Karen, Tim's drone was like a giant, annoying mosquito buzzing around her perfect little world. She didn't know Tim very well, and she didn't care to. All she saw was a kid with a noisy toy, and that was enough to make her grumpy. That sunny afternoon, Tim was having the time of his life. His drone zipped through the air, its camera catching glimpses of the neighborhood. He could see his own house from up high with its red roof and white fence. He could see the street where his friend Jake rode his skateboard. Everything looked so tiny from way up there, like a toy village. Tim giggled as he made the drone do a loop. "You're the best, little buddy," he said to it, like the drone could hear him. What Tim didn't know was that someone was watching, not watching in a fun way like cheering him on. No, this was the kind of watching that meant trouble. Across the fence in the house next door, Karen Walsh was standing on her porch. Her arms were crossed and her eyes were narrowed. She heard the drone's buzz and it made her frown deepen. To Karen, that sound wasn't just annoying, it was a challenge. "Who does that kid think he is?" she muttered to herself, tapping her foot. Karen's house was big and fancy, with a tall wooden fence around her backyard. She liked to keep things private and she didn't want anyone, especially a kid with a drone, poking around. The truth was, Karen had been watching Tim for a while. Every time he flew his drone, she'd peek out her window or step outside to glare at him. She'd even written a letter to Tim's mom saying the drone was disturbing the peace. Tim's mom just laughed it off. "He's a kid, Karen," she'd said. "Let him have fun." But Karen wasn't laughing, not one bit. As Tim played, he had no idea that Karen was about to make a big fuss. He was too busy dreaming about all the cool things he could do with his drone. Maybe he'd film a video of the neighborhood and show it to his friends, or maybe he'd use it to explore places he couldn't reach, like the top of the big oak tree down the street. Tim's mind was full of ideas and his heart was full of joy. He felt like he could do anything. But trouble has a way of sneaking up when you least expect it. Karen wasn't just annoyed, she was mad, and when Karen got mad, she didn't just sit there. She did something about it. That afternoon, as Tim's drone buzzed happily, Karen made up her mind. "That's it," she said, grabbing her phone. "I'm putting a stop to this right now." She didn't know it yet, but her plan was about to backfire in the biggest way possible. Tim, of course, was clueless. He was just a kid enjoying his favorite hobby. He didn't mean to bother anyone, and he definitely didn't want to start a fight. But sometimes the things we love can make other people grumpy, especially if they're looking for a reason to be upset. Karen was looking for that reason, and Tim's drone was the perfect target. What she didn't realize was that Tim wasn't just any kid. He was curious, clever, and about to stumble into something much bigger than a neighborhood argument. The sun was still shining, and the day was still beautiful. But a storm was brewing in Oakwood Heights, not the kind with rain and thunder, but the kind with shouting and surprises. Tim's drone kept flying, its little camera catching bits and pieces of the world below. And somewhere in those bits and pieces was a secret that Karen didn't want anyone to find. Can you guess what it was? Don't worry if you don't know yet. This story's just getting started, and there's a whole lot more to come. As Tim stood in his backyard, he felt like the luckiest kid in the world. His drone was his ticket to adventure, and nothing could ruin this perfect day, or so he thought. Across the fence, Karen was already dialing a number, her voice low and angry. "This is Karen Walsh," she said into her phone. "I need to report a problem." Tim didn't hear her, but he was about to find out that his quiet little hobby was going to stir up a whole lot of noise. What do you think happens next? Can you picture Tim happy and carefree while Karen plots to shut him down? And what's so special about that drone anyway? Maybe it's more than just a toy. Maybe it's the key to something huge. If you're wondering, you're in the right place. This story's got twists, turns, and a big surprise that'll make you say, "No way." So keep watching, because Tim's about to learn that sometimes the smallest things, like a kid and his drone, can change everything. Karen Walsh was the kind of person who thought she was the boss of everyone in Oakwood Heights. She wasn't just any neighbor, she was the president of the HOA, which is like being the rule maker for the whole neighborhood. Karen loved making sure everything was perfect. If your grass grew a tiny bit too tall, she'd stick a note on your door. If your dog barked even once, she'd call it a big problem. And if she heard anything she didn't like, watch out, because Karen was on the case. To Karen, Tim's drone was the worst thing ever. That little buzzing toy drove her nuts. Every time Tim flew it in his backyard, Karen's face would get all red and she'd start muttering to herself. She thought the drone was loud and annoying, like a fly that wouldn't go away. But to Tim, it was his favorite thing in the world. He loved making it zoom up high and spin around. It wasn't just a toy, it was like his own little airplane. One day, things got really serious. Tim was out in his yard, flying his drone like always. The sun was shining and he was having so much fun. He made the drone dip low, then soar up over the trees. He was smiling big, thinking about how cool it would be to film a video of the whole neighborhood. But then, a loud voice broke through the air. "Timothy Carter," Karen shouted from the other side of the fence. Her voice was sharp, like when a teacher catches you talking in class. Tim jumped a little and his drone wobbled in the sky. He looked over and saw Karen standing there, her hands on her hips. She looked super mad, like she was ready to explode. "That toy of yours is a menace," she yelled. "It's way too loud and I'm sick of it." Tim's heart started to beat fast. He didn't know what to say. "It's just my drone," he said quietly, holding the remote tight. "It's not hurting anyone." He thought maybe if he explained, Karen would calm down. He told her it was his hobby and that he was careful with it. But Karen didn't care. Her eyes got even narrower and she shook her head. "I'm not listening to excuses," she snapped. "If you don't stop flying that thing right now, I'm calling the police." Tim felt like someone had dumped cold water on him. The police, for flying a drone. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He just wanted to have fun. But Karen was already walking away, her phone in her hand. She looked serious, like she really meant it. Tim stood there, frozen, as his drone hovered above him. He didn't know what to do. Should he stop flying it? Should he tell his mom? All he knew was that Karen's words made him feel small, like he was a bad kid. Inside, Tim was confused and a little scared. He wasn't a troublemaker. He got good grades, helped his mom with chores, and never got in fights. So why was Karen so angry? It didn't make sense. He looked at his drone, still buzzing softly in the air, and thought about putting it away. But something stopped him. A little voice in his head said, "This isn't fair. Why should he have to give up something he loved just because Karen didn't like it?" Tim wasn't like other kids. Sure, he was only 14, but he was super smart. He loved figuring things out, like how to fix a broken toy or make his drone fly better. At school, his teachers always said he asked the best questions. And right now, he had a big question. Why is Karen so mad about my drone? It wasn't just that it was loud. There was something else going on. He could feel it. As the days went by, Karen didn't let up. Every time Tim tried to fly his drone, she'd show up like a storm cloud. Sometimes she'd bang on his front door and leave angry notes. One note said, "Your drone is against the rules." Another said, "Stop disturbing the neighborhood." Tim's mom read the notes and shook her head. "She's being silly," his mom said. "You're not breaking any laws." But even though his mom wasn't worried, Tim couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was up to something. One afternoon, Tim was sitting on his porch thinking hard. He remembered how Karen always acted weird when his drone was in the air. She'd run outside and stare at it like she was afraid of something. But what? It was just a little drone with a camera. It couldn't do anything bad. Tim started to wonder if Karen was hiding something. Maybe she didn't want anyone to see her yard. Her house had a tall fence all around the back, so nobody could peek in. That made Tim curious. What was behind that fence? Tim wasn't the kind of kid to spy on people. He was nice and honest, but Karen's yelling was getting to him. He didn't like feeling like a criminal just for playing in his own yard. So he decided to be brave. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he told himself. "But I'm gonna find out why she's so upset." He didn't know it yet, but that choice was going to change everything. The next time Karen yelled at him, Tim paid close attention. She was standing by her gate, waving her arms and shouting about the drone, but her eyes kept darting to her backyard like she was checking to make sure something was hidden. Tim's stomach did a little flip. "There's something she doesn't want me to see," he thought. He didn't know what it was, but he was starting to feel like a detective in one of his favorite mystery books. Karen's threats kept coming, and Tim's worry grew. What if she really called the police? Would they take his drone away? Would he get in trouble? He didn't want that to happen, but he also didn't want to give up. His drone was his way of exploring, of dreaming big. And deep down, he knew Karen was being unfair. He just needed to figure out why. As the sun set over Oakwood Heights, Tim sat in his room, looking at his drone on his desk. It was quiet now, but it held a secret. Maybe it could help him solve the mystery of Karen Walsh. Tim wasn't sure what he'd find, but he was ready to keep going. Something told him this wasn't just about a noisy toy. Something bigger was hiding in Karen's world, and Tim was about to get closer to the truth. The days after Karen's big outburst were tough for Tim. Her complaints didn't stop. They got even louder. Every time Tim stepped outside with his drone, Karen seemed to know. She'd bang on his front door like an angry bear, her face all red and frowny. Sometimes she'd leave voicemails on Tim's mom's phone saying stuff like, "Your kid's drone is breaking the rules," or "That noise is a violation." Tim's mom would listen, roll her eyes, and say, "Karen needs to relax." She told Tim to keep quiet and maybe not fly his drone for a while. "Let her cool off," his mom said. But Tim couldn't just forget about it. His drone was his favorite thing and he wasn't doing anything wrong. Plus, something about Karen's yelling made him super curious. Why was she so mad about a little buzzing toy? Most people in the neighborhood didn't care. His friend Jake even thought the drone was awesome. So why was Karen acting like it was the end of the world? Tim's brain was buzzing with questions, just like his drone buzzed in the sky. Tim started watching Karen more closely. He wasn't trying to be sneaky, but he couldn't help it. Every time he flew his drone, Karen would rush outside like her house was on fire. She'd stand by her tall wooden fence, staring up at the drone with nervous eyes. Sometimes she'd glance back at her backyard like she was afraid of something. What's she hiding? Tim thought. It was like a puzzle, and he wanted to figure it out. One afternoon, Tim sat on his porch thinking hard. He remembered how Karen's fence was so high you couldn't see over it. Most yards in Oakwood Heights had short fences or none at all. But Karen was like a wall, keeping her backyard a big secret. That made Tim's curiosity grow even bigger. He wasn't the kind of kid to get into trouble, but he was the kind who loved solving mysteries. And Karen's weird behavior was a mystery he couldn't ignore. That evening, Tim made a bold choice. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink. Most of the neighborhood was quiet, with kids inside eating dinner. Tim grabbed his drone and went to his backyard. He told himself he wasn't doing anything bad, just flying his drone like always. But deep down, he had a plan. He wanted to fly it a little higher, just enough to peek over Karen's fence. He wasn't trying to spy, or at least, that's what he told himself. He just wanted to know what was going on. Tim's heart beat fast as he turned on the drone. It hummed to life, its little propellers spinning. He moved the remote, making it lift off the grass and climb into the air. Higher and higher it went until it was above the trees. Tim tilted the camera to look down, and there it was, Karen's backyard. He held his breath, waiting to see something boring like a garden or a patio. But what he saw made his eyes go wide. Karen's yard wasn't normal. It was full of strange stuff. There were big metal barrels, the kind you'd see in a factory, not a backyard. Long hoses were tangled on the ground, and there were piles of dirt everywhere. It didn't look like someone was planting flowers or building a sandbox. It looked wrong, suspicious. Tim's drone camera caught it all, and he watched the screen on his remote, his mouth open. "What is that?" he whispered. Before he could look longer, a loud yell broke the quiet. "Timothy Carter." Karen's voice was like a siren. Tim jumped and the drone wobbled. He looked over and saw Karen standing by her gate, shaking her fist. "Get that thing out of the sky," she screamed. "You're in big trouble now, kid." Her face was so angry it scared Tim a little. Then he saw her pull out her phone and start dialing. "I'm calling 911, she shouted. Tim's stomach did a flip. 911 for a drone. His hands shook as he brought the drone back down to his yard. It landed softly on the grass, but Tim's heart was still racing. Had he gone too far? Was he really in trouble? He didn't mean to make Karen so mad, but now she was calling the police. He felt a mix of fear and guilt, like when you accidentally break something and know you're gonna get yelled at. But then Tim thought about what he'd seen. Those barrels, those hoses, that dirt, it wasn't normal. Karen wasn't just mad about noise. She was mad because his drone might have seen something she didn't want anyone to know about. Tim wasn't sure what it was, but he knew it was important. He grabbed his drone and ran inside, his mind spinning. Should he tell his mom? Should he look at the drone's video again? He wasn't sure, but he felt like he was onto something big. That night, Tim couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Karen's backyard. He replayed the drone's video on his phone, watching the barrels and hoses over and over. The more he looked, the more he was sure something was wrong. He didn't know what those things were for, but they didn't belong in a neighbor's yard. And Karen's reaction, it was like she was scared of getting caught. The next day, Karen was quieter, but Tim could tell she was still watching him. When he went outside to ride his bike, he saw her peeking out her window. Her eyes followed him like she was waiting for him to do something else. It made Tim feel nervous, but it also made him more curious. If Karen was so worried about his drone, there had to be a reason, and Tim was determined to find out what it was. He started being extra careful. He didn't fly his drone for a couple of days, even though he really wanted to. Instead, he watched Karen's house from his bedroom window. He noticed little things like how she never let anyone go in her backyard. When the mailman came, she grabbed her mail at the door instead of letting him near her gate. It was like she was guarding something. Tim also talked to his friend Jake, who lived a few houses down. "Have you ever seen Karen's backyard?" Tim asked. Jake shook his head. "Nope, she's super private. My mom says Karen's just weird." But Tim didn't think it was just weirdness. He told Jake about the barrels and hoses, and Jake's eyes got big. "That sounds like something from a spy movie," Jake said. "You gotta find out more." Tim nodded, but he wasn't sure how. He knew he had to be smart about it. If Karen was calling the police, he couldn't just fly his drone over her yard again, but he couldn't let it go either. The mystery was too big and Tim was too curious. He felt like a detective, and this was his first real case. As the week went on, Tim's worry mixed with excitement. He didn't know what he'd find, but he knew he was close to something important. Karen's angry shouts and nervous glances were clues, and his drone's video was proof that something strange was happening. Things were heating up in Oakwood Heights, and Tim was right in the middle of it all. Tim's heart was pounding like a drum as he stood on his porch, clutching his drone. He could hear sirens getting closer, and before he knew it, a police car pulled up right in front of his house. Two officers stepped out, their badges shiny in the sunlight. Tim's eyes went wide. He'd never seen the police come to his street before, and now they were here because of him. His stomach felt all twisty, like when you're about to get in big trouble. Karen was already at her gate, waiting for the officers. She looked angrier than ever, pointing at Tim like he was the worst kid in the world. "That boy's drone is a public nuisance," she shouted, her voice loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. "It's making noise all the time, disturbing everyone. I want you to take it away right now." Her finger jabbed the air and her face was red like a tomato about to burst. Tim felt small under her mean stare. He held his drone tighter like it was his only friend. He wanted to say something, to tell the officers he wasn't doing anything bad, but his throat felt stuck. All he could do was stand there, watching as Karen kept yelling. He thought maybe the police would believe her. Maybe they'd take his drone and tell him he couldn't fly it anymore. The idea made his chest hurt. His drone was his favorite thing, and he didn't want to lose it. But then something surprising happened. One of the officers, a tall man with a kind face, raised his hand to quiet Karen. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but strong, "we're not here about the drone." Tim blinked. Karen stopped talking, her mouth half open like she didn't know what to say. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice wobbly now. She didn't sound so sure of herself anymore. The second officer, a woman with short hair, stepped forward. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand. "Ms. Walsh," she said, looking right at Karen, "we've had reports of illegal activity at this address. Can we take a look in your backyard?" Tim's jaw dropped. Illegal activity? What was that? He didn't know exactly, but it sounded serious. Karen's face changed. Her eyes got big and her cheeks went pale like she'd seen a ghost. For the first time ever, Tim saw Karen look nervous, really, really nervous. Karen tried to talk. "My backyard," she said, her voice shaking. "There's nothing to see there, just plants and stuff." But the officers didn't look convinced. The tall one nodded toward her gate. "We'd like to check, ma'am," he said. "It won't take long." Karen stood there, frozen, like she didn't know what to do. Then slowly she stepped aside, letting the officers walk past her into her yard. Tim watched, his heart racing even faster now. He couldn't believe what was happening. The police weren't here for him, they were here for Karen. But why? What was in her backyard that was so important? Tim's mind went back to the video he'd seen on his drone. Those big barrels, the hoses, the piles of dirt, it didn't look right. And now the police wanted to see it too. Was it possible that his drone had found something big? As the officers disappeared behind Karen's tall fence, Tim's brain started to put the pieces together. He remembered how Karen always got mad when he flew his drone near her yard. He thought about how nervous she looked when it went high enough to see over her fence. And then it hit him like a lightning bolt, his drone footage. He'd caught something on camera, something Karen didn't want anyone to know about. His hands shook as he pulled his phone out of his pocket. The video was still there, saved from the other day. Tim's fingers moved fast, opening the video. He watched it again, his eyes glued to the screen. There they were, the barrels with strange warning signs on them, the hoses all tangled up, and stacks of boxes that looked heavy and weird. It wasn't just junk, it looked dangerous. Tim's stomach did another flip, but this time it wasn't fear, it was excitement. He had proof of something huge, and the police needed to see it. Excuse me, Tim called out, his voice a little squeaky. He ran toward the officers who were just coming back from Karen's yard. I think I have something you should see. The tall officer turned around, raising an eyebrow. What's that, kid? He asked. Tim held up his phone, his hands trembling. My drone, he said. It recorded something in her backyard. I didn't mean to, but look. The officers leaned in as Tim played the video. Their eyes got serious as they watched. The woman officer pointed at the screen. Those barrels, she said, they've got hazard labels. The tall officer nodded. And those boxes, that's not normal yard stuff. They looked at each other, then back at Tim. Good job, kid, the woman said. This could be important. Tim's heart felt like it was going to burst. He couldn't believe it. His drone had actually helped the police. He looked over at Karen, who was standing by her gate, her face white as a sheet. She wasn't yelling anymore. She wasn't pointing or complaining. She just stood there looking like she wanted to disappear. Tim realized something big. Karen wasn't just a grumpy neighbor who hated noise. She was hiding something bad, really bad. The tall officer walked over to Karen. Ms. Walsh, he said, his voice firm, we're going to need you to come with us. We have some questions. Karen opened her mouth, but no words came out. She looked at Tim, then at the drone in his hands, and her shoulders slumped. For the first time, Tim didn't feel scared of her. He felt strong, like he'd done something really important. As the officers talked to Karen, Tim stood on his porch watching it all unfold. His drone was still in his hands, its little camera quiet now, but that camera had seen something nobody else had. It had caught Karen's secret, a secret she tried so hard to keep. Tim didn't know all the details yet, but he knew one thing for sure. Karen wasn't just mad about a noisy drone. She was running some kind of illegal operation, something so serious the police had to get involved. And Tim's little toy had blown her cover wide open. The neighborhood was quiet now, but Tim's mind was buzzing. He'd been so worried about getting in trouble, but instead he'd helped uncover something huge. Karen wasn't the queen of Oakwood Heights anymore. She was just a person who'd made a big mistake, and Tim's drone had shown everyone the truth. After the police found out what was really going on in Karen's backyard, everything changed in Oakwood Heights. It turned out that Karen wasn't just a grumpy neighbor. She was doing something really bad. Her backyard was like a secret hideout for throwing away dangerous stuff like chemicals that could hurt people. It was illegal and super serious. The police had to call in a special team called a hazmat team. They wore big suits and masks to clean up the mess so it wouldn't make anyone sick. Karen didn't look like the bossy HOA president anymore. When the police figured out what she was doing, they put handcuffs on her wrists and walked her to their car. She was still trying to make excuses, saying things like, "It's not what you think," or "I didn't do anything wrong," but nobody believed her. Everyone could see the truth now. The whole time she was telling people to follow her rules, she was breaking much bigger ones. Tim watched from his porch as the police car drove away with Karen in the back. He didn't feel scared of her anymore. The neighborhood was full of chatter. People stood on their lawns, talking to each other with big eyes. "Can you believe it?" one neighbor said. "Karen was always so bossy, and now look." Another neighbor shook his head. "She acted like she owned the place, but she was hiding all that bad stuff." Nobody could stop talking about it. The HOA queen, the lady who complained about everything, was gone, and it was all because of Tim. Tim's drone video was the star of the show. The police looked at it again and again, amazed at what he'd caught on camera. Those barrels with warning signs, the hoses, and the weird boxes, they were all proof of Karen's secret. The tall officer came back to Tim's house later that day. "You did a great job, kid," he said, giving Tim a big smile. "Your drone helped us figure this out. You're a hero." Tim's cheeks got red. He'd never been called a hero before. It felt pretty awesome. Tim's mom was so proud she couldn't stop talking about it. "My son's a genius," she told everyone. She hugged Tim tight and said, "I knew you were special, but wow." She even made his favorite dinner, pizza and ice cream, to celebrate. Tim felt warm inside, like the sun was shining just for him. He'd been so worried about getting in trouble, but instead he'd done something really important. Even the neighbors started acting different. Before, most of them didn't pay much attention to Tim. He was just the new kid who liked gadgets. But now they smiled and waved when they saw him. One lady, Mrs. Thompson, stopped by with cookies. "You're a brave boy, Tim," she said. "Thanks for helping keep our neighborhood safe." Tim took the cookies and grinned. He wasn't used to all this attention, but it felt good. The HOA was a mess after Karen left. She'd been in charge for so long, telling everyone what to do. Now they needed a new president. People started talking about who it should be. "Maybe someone nicer," Jake's mom said at a meeting. "Someone who doesn't